A favorite progression of mine and many jazz musicians to solo over is what's known as the minor jazz blues progression, which is featured on several famous jazz compositions such as Mr. PC and Equinox by John Coltrane, Stolen Moments by Oliver Nelson, Footprints by Wayne Shorter. And if you're old enough to remember the original Spider-Man TV cartoon in the late 60s, the theme song, the Spider-Man theme song, used the minor jazz blues progression. And in a more of a blues, straight up blues vein, The Thrill's Gone by B.B. King is a minor blues progression. And in a more of a blues rock setting, Since I've Been Loving You, Led Zeppelin is a classic minor blues, which features some additional very interesting and unique chord changes complements of Jimmy Page. What I'd like to do in this lesson is introduce you to the basic minor jazz blues progression, and later I'll show you some interesting substitutions that we can use. And we're going to start out just using basic bar chords and the traditional flat four Freddie Green Count Basie big band style strumming. And it's a 12-bar progression. We're going to use the key of E minor. We've been working with the key of G major in the last half a dozen lessons when we're talking about the major jazz blues progression. I figured E minor is the easiest key to think in on a guitar, right? So it's 12 bars, and the structure is a little different than the major jazz blues progression. The 1 chord and the 4 chord are both minor, and the so-called punch line, which is the last 4 bars, actually specifically it's bars 9 and 10. Instead of going 5, 4, 1 like a straight blues would, or 2, 5, 1 like a jazz blues would, it goes minor 6, or actually flat 6 dominant to 5 dominant 1. So it's flat 6, 5, 1. And here's a basic version of it in key B minor. Kind of sounds almost like Minnie the Moocher, that old Cab Calloway song that was famously reprised in the 1980 film The Blues Brothers. But that's a slightly different progression. And this is kind of like a gypsy jazz type of thing almost. So here it is. All right, so we stay on the 1 chord, E minor, for 4 bars, but what we're going to do is in the 3rd bar, we're going to switch to E7, and that becomes the 5 of 4. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. Nice lazy strum, right? Get that little hiccup on beat 4. And then we're at the 4 chord, A minor for 2 bars, back to the 1 chord, E minor for 2 more bars. And here's the punch line, bar 9, C7, B7, back to the 1 chord, E minor, and then a turnaround to the 5 chord, and then it repeats. And then you just end on the 1 chord again. You could also comp in a more modern and, dare I say, hipper rhythm than that. You know, that's like the real traditional big band, also sounds like a gypsy jazz type of rhythm. But say if you wanted to go 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. You know, you're doing like that horn section, stabs or jabs that we talked about in previous lessons, and leaving some space, you know, let the soloist fill out, dictate, you know, how dense he wants to make it. Before we go any further with the chord progression, I would like to demonstrate a cool walking bass line played over a minor jazz blues progression, mostly quarter notes. And as I showed you in some previous lessons, I'm going to use some open string pull-offs, little ghost notes to kind of help give it that swing feel. And I'll play with my thumb like the way Sting does. Here we go. Getting back to the chords, here is a different set of voicings that uses seventh chords, minor sevenths, instead of the straight up minor, E minor and A minor 7. And shell voicings for the C7 and B7. We have some muted strings in there, and it sounds a little more modern and hip. And but for the sake of comparison, I'm going to maintain that flat 4 traditional feel. So here it is. So now I'm using this voicing of E minor 7. So it's 7, 5, 7, 5 on the middle 4 strings only. Be careful not to accidentally bar the top string or you'll get that A, which actually is kind of a cool, it gives you a minor 11 chord, but you have to specifically want that. Otherwise, just mute it. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. In the fourth bar, we're going to make that minor third, G major. So then we got our standard E7 shape. And then we're going to go to A minor 7. Here's a muted string chord. We have a ring finger bar across the D, G, and B strings at the 5th fret. The A string is muted by the underbelly, the middle finger, which frets the low bass notes. That way you can strum across the bottom 5. And if you hit the top string there, it's okay, because you're just doubling the root on top. And you notice I'm squeezing and releasing to make those quarter notes staccato. And then back to E minor 7, bar 8, and bar 9. Here's our voicing of C7. See, earlier we did the full bar chord, which is nice, but that has, to me, that's not like a pure jazz sound. It's more of like a, I don't know, a jazz rock or something. But using these voicings, again, we're muting the A string with the, this time with the underside of the index finger, so we can strum across it. So we got 8, nothing, 8, 9, 8. And top string is definitely muted with the base of the index finger. That's a nice funky voicing, right, for C7, and you just slide that down a half step for B7. This works out nicely because you have the root note E on top. Then, so it makes sense, you know, you're hearing the key note in the voicing there.